So I'm sitting with Noor now, who's going to talk about her journey and the work that she is doing that brings her above the mark. So just to start off, you've obviously founded quite a few organizations and so and such. So why did you feel the need to set these up? Where did that come from?
So the first organisation I'll talk about is a foundation that I set up about 7 years ago called I Dare You. And just as the name suggests, the whole purpose of that is to dare women of all backgrounds, not specific to any specific culture or religion, is to dare women to dare to dream. That's the tagline. And the idea comes to empower women, 16 plus, to do something that they would never have felt the courage to do. Now, the idea was born was about when I was 20 years old. I was homeless in London. I lived rough on the streets for 15 months. And that was as a result because me leaving home, and one thing led to the other, and I was evicted from where I was staying whilst I was studying. Because of that, I ended up sofa surfing for 2 to 3 months, but with my non-Muslim friends, because I was too embarrassed to go to my Muslim friends at that point. I was a very young, proud, loud girl at that time. I felt I couldn't go because I left home the way that I did, and my community almost disowned me. I felt I couldn't go to the Muslims again. So when I exhausted those friendships and those favours and broke some friendship as a result because I overstayed my welcome, my first night happened to be in a bus depot, Piccadilly Circus. And that started my journey of being homeless for the remainder of that 15 months. Being on the streets, seeing things that I have seen and witnessing, and wearing the hijab and understanding that women are the most vulnerable on the streets. Today, even till today, community members won't believe that Muslim women can end up being on the streets. So the idea of my struggles and what I had to put up with, and I kept thinking I must strive to do better, is where that dream idea you came about. And it was when I was on the streets that I used to write on pieces of paper what the logo would look like, what the vision is, what the mission is, what is it that I can do to help others. So Idea You goes through 5 stages. You've got Idea You Explore. It looks at what is it that you're good at, what is it that you have already as your passion and your skill that you want to go out and do something. Idea You Challenge, the second step, looks at, okay, what do you feel are the challenges that are preventing you from chasing those dreams? Thirdly, you've got Idea You Mentor. So we partner these mostly young ladies up to the age of 30 to put an action plan into place through mentoring, so they get the coaching and the support to start realising that dream. Then you got step 4, which is called Slice of Your World. And what that is we marry up women with, so let's say you've got an interest in fashion. So we part you either a half-day shadowing service or a coffee session with somebody, a woman who's working in that industry already, just to give you that extra inspiration. And lastly, we've got Sister You Rock, and that means sister in humanity. So those women who have walked the Idea You journey, as we call it, we ask them to do one of 2 things: either come back and become a mentor for those who've got the skills to become a mentor, so you can help existing women in the journey, or come back and just share your story. The second organisation that I got involved in was a group of sisters set up a charity called Amira Foundation, and that helps women who suffer domestic abuse or who have suffered homelessness to take those women off the streets, or those who choose to leave their violent environments or violent partners or ex-partners and to have a better life. So I got involved just after that got set up with a group of sisters, and being a trustee and a director for that, it's important because of my own story about knowing how it is to be homeless and having lots of disadvantages work against me. This is why I kind of committed myself in doing that. So these 2 organisations is what I dedicate my time to. But in the background, the third thing that I've always been doing for the last 7 years now is running homeless projects. 7 years ago, there wasn't any Muslims providing soup kitchens or hot food to the homeless, and I started out working with Christian missionaries, churches and Hare Krishna centres to deliver food as a volunteer. And that's how I got involved, because I was homeless and I could see that there wasn't enough being done for the community, especially for the women in the homeless community. That's how I started to get involved in soup kitchens. And I've taken a step back now, because now the whole soup kitchen area has kind of exploded with a lot of Muslims coming, getting involved. So they're the sort of 3 projects that I'm primarily involved with now.
So a big motivating factor is it wasn't good enough for you to serve yourself, really.
No, it wasn't.
You had to serve Allah through serving people.
Yes.
Yeah. No, that's powerful. Okay, so now I want to talk about, again, your journey to getting to where you are. I heard you mention that you found the courage within yourself to overcome the barriers, whether it is, finances, whether it is being a woman, whatever it is. That is something that I think a lot of people struggle with, right? Finding that courage. What does it mean to you to find the courage, and how could we go about doing that ourselves?
If you need support to get that encouragement, and you do, buddy, we can't do it always on your own. There are times you can do it on your own.
Yeah.
Is to be around those people that bring out the best in you and not the nasty side of you. Or everybody has a horrible side in you, or that can develop a not so nice side of you. Our parents always say when we grow up, make sure you keep good company. Our deen says that, and there's so much wisdom behind that. If you're surrounded yourself around good people, if you've got such people around you and who want to help better you as well, they're the best company to keep, because if you don't, your progression is going to either decrease or come to a halt.
Yeah.
So that's how you have to try to find courage.
What are you doing now then in terms of helping people to overcome those barriers? Women, for example, or from people that come from disadvantaged backgrounds?
So through Amira Foundation and IDEA, we help a lot of those women already, number one. Number two, the community work that I do supports women in that way. Also, people through the public speaking and the various other projects that I do, they find access to the work that we do, and that's how we help women effectively through the work and just through word of mouth and the word spreading.
That's what the organisation is all about.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
You told me I can never be anything, but I'll show you there's nothing that I cannot be.
My upbringing, that's an interesting one. Okay, so I was born and raised in London. There's 7 of us, large family. We don't have anybody here, my family from Bangladesh. My father passed away when I was quite young, I was 17, and he was the only one that supported education, whereas my mum was the complete opposite. So when my dad passed away at 17, my mum's priority was to try to get me married off. And with family pressure, societal pressure, that was the easiest thing for her to kind of champion.
Okay.
So for me to go on to further and higher education, it wasn't a priority at all. If anything, back in those days when I was going to universities, it was unheard of. Nobody in my area in East London went to university, none of the boys or the girls.
Oh, really? Okay.
So for me to say 2 years after my dad passed away that I'm going to go to university was a big shock to the system, to a lot of people.
Is it true that you had brothers? You were the eldest, are you?
So I'm the eldest sister, but I've got 4 older brothers.
Okay,
So whereas none of my brothers went to university,
none of them did. Okay,
and for me to come up and say, actually, I want to do this, I was pushing the boundaries, to say the least. My upbringing was quite conservative. You weren't allowed to question things. I suppose that was quite common during those times. I had to, eventually when I did go to university, I had to kind of get that funding myself.
Okay.
Well, I took a year after college because nobody would give me the money, and that's the year when Blair came into power and abolished grants and funding. So I had to take a year out, and I literally worked 4 jobs just trying to make ends meet and to get enough to pay the first instalment on back then was £1,300, which doesn't sound like a lot today, but it was the equivalent of £9,000 as it is today. So it was hard work. So eventually, when I started to go to university, I had to leave home, and it's not something that you do as an unmarried Muslim girl living in East London do. When I left home, I had to move into the hostels, and that's really when my journey kind of started. So when I upbringing was good when Dad was around, but then when Dad passed away, it became a lot more difficult, especially for Mum, because she had 6 unmarried children, a young widow. So it was hard for Mum. She didn't understand why I was passionate about education. But for me, education was important because Dad was an advocate of education. What that meant was I always saw education as my exit route. It sounds a bit negative, but I see it as a positive, because that's what always has driven me to get my education above and beyond knowing that nobody else in the area has gone through that path.
So you saw it as, I mean, apart from your father really encouraging you, what was it that made you want to be different from what everyone else around you had done? Really?
I've always been called a black sheep in my family, so I always kept thinking outside the box. I always believed there was more to life, and you're gonna probably hate me for saying this, than being chained to the sink and cooking, having 10 kids by the time you hit 30. I thought there was more to life than that. I never saw any women in my community contributing to society, and I just didn't understand why that was. So my dad was the one who's always been helping people in the community. And I kept thinking, my dad used to take me everywhere, whether he's translating, whether he's filling out forms, those things that we take for granted today. But people back then didn't know English and didn't know how to fill out the forms. Because dad did it, that's what inspired me. And I think that was the seed that was planted.
So you had that link between education and serving the community, isn't it? That's maybe what the drive came, where the drive came from. I believe so,
because I didn't understand why people kept talking the talk, but not walking the walk.
And were you ever comparing yourself to people outside of the Muslim community and saying, well, they're getting on with it, why aren't we?
At that time, no, I'll be honest with you, because my worldview was very limited.
Yeah, that was your worldview.
That was my worldview because of, I suppose, the sheltered life that I had, that you would do being the eldest daughter out of 7, or 7 of us siblings in total. And mum was very protective, dad was also very protective. And because of that, my worldview was just the community that I lived in. So I didn't have any role models per se, except for my dad. So.
Wow. That's quite, because usually I think, we were talking to a guest yesterday and they said that one of the driving factors for them was role models they had. But for you, it seems like it purely came out of the seed of kind of looking around and just reflecting on what's not working and stuff, really. And perhaps your father as well played a massive role.
It was a really primitive view of how somebody should help somebody. But obviously, as I grew older, I understood that to mean I learned the hard way that helping others can come in a variety of different ways, and I learned that through my entire journeys till this point.